Good afternoon, Mom. My name is Rico Sombrana, and this is my report about the felonies and circumstances.
Article 3. Acts and omissions punishable by law are felonies or delitos. For an example, there is decide when the act is performed with deliberate intent, and there is fault when the wrongful acts results from imprudence, negligence, lack of foresight, and lack of skills. Article 4. Criminal liability. For an example, any person performing an act which would be an offense against person or property, were it not for the inherent impossibility of each accomplishment or on account of the employment of inadequate or ineffectual means. Consummated, frustrated, and attempted felonies. Consummated felonies, as well as those which are frustrated and attempted, are punishable. For an example, there is an attempt when the offender commits the commissions of a felony directly or overacts, and does not perform all the acts of execution which should produce the felony by reason of some cause or accident other than his own spontaneous desistance. Justifying circumstances are those where the act of a person is said to be in accordance with the law. For an example, anyone who acts in defense of the person or rights of his spouse, his relatives by affinity in the same degrees, and those by consanguinity within the fourth civil degree, provided the first and second requisites prescribed in the next preceding circumstances are present, and the further requisite in case the provocation was given by the person attacked that the one making defense had no part therein. Exempting circumstances are those grounds for exemption from punishment because there is wanting in the agent of the crime any the condition which make the act voluntarily or negligent. For an example, an imbecile or an insane person unless the latter has acted during the lucid interval. When the imbecile or an insane person has committed an act which the law defines as a felony or delito, the court shall order his confinement in one of the hospitals or asylums established for persons thus afflicted, which he shall not be permitted to leave without first obtaining the permission of the same court. Mitigating circumstances. Mitigating circumstances are conditions and factors that do not excuse or justify an offense. For an example, those mentioned in the preceding chapter, when all the requisites necessary to justify the act or to exempt from the criminal liability in their respective cases are not attendant. Aggravating circumstances are circumstances relating to the commission of an act that increase the degree of liability or culpability. Punitive damage are recoverable in a conversion case when the evidence shows the legal malice. For an example, that the crime be committed in the palace of the chief executive or in his presence, or where public authorities are engaged in the discharge of their duties, or in a place dedicated to religious worship. Principals, accomplice, and accessories. The accomplice is liable for all criminal action the principal commits during the commission of the target crime. If the principal shoots and kills a guard, then the accomplice is liable for murder as well. For an example, let's say Lucy is in the car waiting, and Chuck comes running firing his gun behind him. A guard is shot, and Lucy drives them both away from the scene. Lucy is liable for shooting the guard even though she didn't pull the trigger, and even if Chuck got shot and dies. Thus, as an accomplice, Lucy could get the death penalty for killing the guard without firing a shot or even wanting to ever kill someone. Reclusion perpetua, a type of sentence of imprisonment in the Philippines, Argentina, and several other countries. The penalty of reclusion perpetua shall be from 20 years and 1 day to 40 years. Reclusion temporal. The penalty of reclusion temporal shall be from 12 years and 1 day to 20 years. Prison mayor. The duration of penalties of prison mayor and temporary disqualification shall be from 6 years and 1 day to 12 years, except when the penalty and disqualification is imposed as an accessory penalty, in which case its duration shall be that of the principal penalty. Prison correctional. The duration of the penalties of prison correctional, suspension, and deserto shall be from 6 months and 1 day to 6 years, except when the suspension is imposed as an accessory penalty, in which case its duration shall be that of the principal penalty. Arresto mayor. The duration of the penalty of arresto mayor shall be from 1 month and 1 day to 6 months. Arresto minor. The duration of the penalty of arresto minor shall be from 1 day to 30 days. Pardon. A pardon is the use of executive power that exempts the individual to whom it was given from punishment. The President pardon power is based on Article 2 of the Constitution, which says, "He shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in the case of impeachment." Amnesty. In criminal law, sovereign act of oblivion or forgetfulness, from Greek word amnesia, for past acts, granted by a government to persons who have been guilty of crimes. Amnesty is granted usually for political crimes against the state, such as treason, sedition, or rebellion. Commutation of sentence. In a commutation of sentence, a person is not absolved from a conviction completely, but his or her punishment is substituted with a lesser punishment. For example, a death sentence may be commuted to a sentence of imprisonment for life. Recidivism. Recidivism has a lot to do with the community the offender comes from and how they have to enter back into a harsh society. For example, people leaving prison face a lot of barriers that strongly affect recidivism rates. The change from prison or jail back into homes and communities is very complex for the individual and also the family. They may struggle with substance abuse, lack of adequate education or job skills, mental health, and limited housing options. Many are back out on the streets and don't have a job or even a place to live. Habitual delinquency. A person is considered as a habitual delinquent if within a period of 10 years from the date of his last release or conviction of the crime of serious or less physical injuries and found guilty of any aforementioned crimes a third time or more. Under the last subsection of paragraph 5 of Article 62 of the Revised Penal Code, a person shall be deemed to be habitually delinquent if within a period of 10 years from the date of his release or last conviction of the crime of robbery, theft, staffa, or falsification, he is found guilty of any of said crimes a third time of oftener. Quasi-recidivism is a special aggravating circumstances where a person, after having been convicted by final judgment, shall commit a new felony before beginning to serve such sentence, or while serving the same. He shall be punished by the maximum period of the penalty prescribed by law for the new felony. The penalty is justified because of the perversity and incorrigibility of the offender. For example, A was convicted of homicide. While serving his sentence, he was found smoking marijuana. He was prosecuted for illegal use of prohibited drugs and was convicted. Is he a quasi-recidivist? No, because the crime committed while serving sentence is not a felony. Suppose that A was found guilty of illegal use of prohibited drugs while he was serving sentence. He killed a fellow inmate. Is he a quasi-recidivist? Yes, because while serving sentence, he committed a felony. Complex crime. When a single act constitutes two or more grave or less grave felonies, or when an offense is a necessary means for committing the other, the penalty for the most serious crime shall be imposed, the same to be applied in its maximum period. A complex crime, strictly speaking, is one where the offender has to commit an offense as a means for the commission of another offense. It is said that the offense is committed as a necessary means to commit the other offense. Necessary should not be understood as indispensable. Otherwise, it shall be considered absurd and not giving rise to a complex crime. Criminal liability. Criminal liability may be partially or totally extinguished. Total extinction means that the entire penalty is extinguished and there is no more criminal liability. For example, by death of the convict as the personal penalties and as to pecuniary penalties, liability therefore is extinguished only when the death of the offender occurs before the final judgment. That's all my discussion about the felonies and circumstances map. Thank you and have a great day.